Hi, Marketing 424 class. My name is Jeff, and I'm here today with Dr. Steve Mecca. We're going to talk a bit about the project, one of the possible projects that we could be working on, your team and my team. As you know, I've already introduced some, but I'm really excited to share here what Dr. Mecca has to offer. So, if you don't mind, give me a little introduction. Let me know who you are and let the people at home know who
Okay,
you
so
are.
I'm Steve Mecca. Maybe some of you who are seeing this know me. I'm a professor of physics in the Department of Engineering and Physics Systems, where I also head a lab called the S Lab, which works on developing world problems that haven't been solved very well. Been around for a long time, usually in the area of water, sanitation, and education. But I also wear the hat of a director of a 501c3 in the United States and an NGO in West Africa called the Global Sustainable Aid Project. I will refer to that probably once in a while in the questions that Jeff puts before me. I will, instead of saying Global Sustainable Aid Project so many times, I'll just say GSAP. When I'm saying GSAP, that's the organization I'm talking about. I guess the third hat is just someone who is interested in seeing a world that that we can make a little bit better with by the application of our talents and our interests. And so the challenge, I guess, that we're going to have here today is I need to do a pitch session for toilets. Think about that sometime. That's uh, I hope that I hope that it works somewhat, especially at the end of our few minutes together. That you may be able to see the value of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and so the thing we're talking about is as Dr. Mecca mentioned, is the GSAP micro flush toilet. And particularly this project is a little bit different maybe than some of the other work you've done in developing nations because it's something that's specific to us.
It is, yeah. So we've been working on toilets for quite a number of years, and we developed a toilet that flushes on just a cup, about that much water. And that water comes from the prior user's washing of hands. So the user flushes the toilet, washes the hands, that water goes into do the next flush of the toilet. The toilet is a sustainable design in the sense that it doesn't require dislodging and waste treatment. Uh, Following dislodging, it produces a useful product, a rich pathogen-free compost. So after 2.5 or 3 years, the user removes the back cover and they harvest a useful product. So this particular toilet gained some momentum early on with the help of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They helped us sort of get it out of the laboratory and research space into the working space in the field. And we implemented it in Ghana with the help of the Gates Foundation. Uh, just very, very quickly, usually you find problems with new technologies that you introduce, problems that you didn't have in the research space. But in this case, that didn't happen. The only issue following those demonstration projects was the issue of cost. The toilets were extremely expensive for a developing world. They were about $1,200. Those prototypes cost about $1,200 per stall. Might not think of that as being excessive for an entire toilet, digester, filter digester, superstructure, but it is for someone who's earning a couple of dollars a day. So we worked for about 11 months to develop a locally sourced, locally produced version of the toilet. Got the price down to $300, of which 200 was the material cost and $100 was the profit to the maker. We use that word maker for someone who has been trained on how to properly make the toilet. That training process takes about 4 or 5 days between some classroom sessions and some field sessions. So in a way, we've got not only a sustainable technology, but also a sustainable way of doing a business model in the developing world. Now, fast forward to the United States and Canada, where over the years, we have been asked about the applicability of our toilet in the United States, and especially in northern climates, because the toilet was really developed for the tropical world, where we have temperatures that are reflective of that part of the country, of that part of the world. And here we are in New England with freezing temperatures. Will this toilet, which requires a certain environment for the digestion process for both the microbes and a macroorganism, will they survive winter temperatures? So we undertook a study of the thermodynamics of the system, and lo and behold, if they're installed in a particular way, they will function in the U.S. They're actually being used in climates similar to ours in the Bekaa Valley of eastern Lebanon, where the Syrian refugees, we've trained Syrian refugees on how to build toilets. We call them makers again. We have Syrian makers. And so their climates are very similar to ours here in New England, and they work just fine. We have also built, two here in the United States. One this past spring, an ADA compliant version of the toilet, and we also built a small version of our toilet for a farm. And we weren't sure that the habitat would survive the winter, that the earthworm and the macroorganism wouldn't survive the winters, but they do. And so now that question that people asked years ago and they've been asking recently about applicability in the United States becomes a real question, a real good question, because we know the toilet technology will work. What we don't know is what the market might be. So thinking about the feature of the toilet, one feature is off-grid, very, very low stingy use of water. In fact, it reuses water. And doesn't require dislodging. It's not connected to any septic system. It's not connected to any sewer system. It simply functions and processes waste right there within the facility itself.
And one other thing, I mean, to the end user, the person who might be using a porta-john now or paying an exorbitant amount of money to have a remote facility installed, the cost, the upfront cost initially, right?
Yeah, the cost is another issue. So we took a look at some public facilities, a park, a campground type park, where 2 toilets were recently installed. It's at Beavertail Park in Jamestown, where they pay $25,000 per system. And so even the U.S. version now of it, and this ADA compliant version, will be, I don't know, probably $2,000, $2,500, 1/10 the price. So there is a price advantage as well.
Yeah. So now that you perhaps have a little bit more sense of toilets in general, and specifically the GSAP microflush toilet, I'm curious what role you think we could play in helping you either understand the market, understand the potential consumer. We got networked through Dan Horn, and I've really enjoyed hearing about this. And I think there's a couple opportunities, but I'm curious to see where you think we could help.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm looking to influence, to encourage some of you listening to this short video to consider using your talents, to consider using your interest in marketing, the talents you've developed so far. I think this is being pitched to seniors.
It is.
So you guys are ready now to go into the world of work and put to use your really developed skills and knowledge. It probably won't be in the area of toilets, but this is certainly a challenging issue. But I really hope to use the expertise. I'm really not looking at you so much as a student giving you a little, a tiny experiential project, but rather using your talents to bring to bear in a really serious way on studying the market for this particular system. We're not so much looking at the business model for deploying it, for distribution and so on. It's really that marketing question. There's a group of people then, a group of organizations that have some needs. Do any of those needs fit this particular product? And so learning that will make a big difference in the subsequent business models, and maybe even influence an iteration of the design. So what's happened so far is that I've taken the last 5 months to take our initial design, to take we actually implemented one ADA compliant version of our toilet in a place called Camp Creek in West Virginia early this summer. It was a surprise to me. I thought they were going to just take one of our African toilets, but instead they said, could we make this ADA compliant? And of course, I knew that we could, but I hadn't developed the best sort of arrangement of parts to do that. So there was a little bit of bend to fit, forced to hide, but we built an ADA compliant version in Camp Creek that they've been using now all summer. So we have now a new model. It's not just a new physical model, it's also a new deployment model. And this is going to be key in the study. So in the developing world, in Africa, Central America, and so on, Latin America, we train makers. I mentioned to you that it takes about 4 days, a better part of a week, to train a new maker and how to properly make these toilets. And then when we're finished, they now have an opportunity for business for themselves. In the way I see any one of the possible markets, many of which you will come up with on your own here, that's not going to be reasonable to train a person, one-on-one training in order just to build one toilet at, say, a soccer field or something. Instead, the design that we've come up with involves a kit of parts that includes the trickiest parts of the construction. The things that take most time during the training, the field training. And our hope will be that we'll take that kit of parts coupled with maybe a training video. We're actually looking now to set up with to do videography on a field installation, and use just that alone able to get the system installed. Interesting thing is that I met with the town manager in Jamestown recently. We had a private meeting where he talked about the need for these facilities in our town. And that would be great, because if I have a location that's nearby, I can easily set up the videography and so on to do this. But it's important to know that it's a little different. We're not in Ghana, a maker sells a toilet. Here, there'll be a business enterprise, is one that's sort of stepped forward that is interested in doing this, and distributing, fabricating the kits and distributing. But we are just not sure of what the markets are and how big they are. And so the information that you can add to this process, the marketing information, will possibly influence, by the way, a slight changes in the engineering design, but more importantly, will allow the business entity in GSAP to decide at the margin where is it best to invest its resources in terms of getting it out there. And the more and more I think about it, talk to Jeff and to Dan Horn about this. It's interesting. We thought that a user, for example, a user of a permanent porta potty is probably a market for this. If you overlay long-term user of a porta potty with off-grid, with lack of access to waste treatment and so on, with finances, with budget, you overlap those things, they are like the core of the target, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you would call that in marketing, but they're the center of that, of the total market. So fleshing all of that out, documenting all of that is really, really important. And I had originally approached the business department about having a student working in the YES lab this semester on taking this on as a research project. But then your professor came along and said, this could be one of our projects, in one of our team projects in the course. And that's actually an even better idea, because it would get the thinking of hopefully more than just one person on the cast. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah. Well, it's not supposed to answer all the questions.
Okay.
It's supposed to provide the appropriate amount of context. Right. So some of the challenges that you might be thinking in your head right now are things that you have the opportunity to come back to Dr. Mecca and follow up with them on. One of the things that we were talking, because we've been talking about this for a little while, is so the Porta-John is portable, but it's also sort of semi-permanent, or it's places where they always are, but having a sense of not just, is it just baseball fields, is it just parks, but having a sense of the consumer. In the end, the consumer of the Porta-John is not the person who uses the Porta-John, but the person who sets it up and says, it's important for me to have this here for the people who use my facilities. So understanding what their needs and concerns are, also getting a sense of perhaps sizing the market. So we talk a bunch about sampling, and to say we don't need to talk to every park ranger in the United States or every Little League baseball field in the United States, but get a sense of maybe some similarly sized locations throughout the country. I know Camp Creek is effectively right down the road from where I grew up, and so these places in West Virginia, whether they're really rural communities who, we don't have access to water out in some places, or the sewage, it's just inaccessible. It may be worth it to investigate the different types of people and what their needs are, potential consumers for that, so that when it comes to messaging the sort of product, we know how we should be talking to them about what their unmet needs are, or what their current challenges with the products that they currently have. How are they currently meeting the needs? Are they exceeding expectations, failing to meet those expectations, and so on? So what are the markets? Also, a sense of size could be a useful part of this project. What needs are being met or not being met currently with the Porta-Johns? Back in the way of speaking to the course of how can I help? All of these different ways are ways that we could help the GSAP microflush toilet and project and all that's involved. I think it would be useful to know also if they wanted to see more about this project.
Absolutely.
We got websites, we got Twitter, Instagram, like what's up?
Well, you've got the Global Sustainable Aid Project website, which is very, very shortly going to change. They're very, very close.
What is it, gsap.com?
No, it's globalsustainableaid.org.
globalsustainableaid.org.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be a primary place. But if you Google GSAP microflush toilet, you'll see there's all sorts of stuff that people tell me are out there.
Because I know that I had a completely different conceptualization of what this thing is. We all have an idea of what a toilet is.
Yeah.
And we get stuck in that mind frame of that's what a toilet should be. But it's a thing that has to accomplish certain goals in a way. It's the thing that we used.
It's the thing that we used this morning, where we pressed a little lever on a porcelain clean device that took our waste, mixed it with gallon or two, actually closer to 2 gallons of potable water, and it went down a pipe and out of sight, out of mind. We never even thought about it after we hit that little lever.
Yeah.
And this is different.
Yeah.
This is a little bit different, and it's our toilets in the United States have been called the gold standard, but I'm not so sure that there is a new gold standard here.
Yeah, and I understand this project from a slightly different perspective. I mean, where I grew up out in the country, our showers were, or I don't know, you call them army showers. You turn the water off, do your thing, turn the water on, turn it back on. We used spray water to flush our toilets because we just didn't have enough running water.
Yeah. In fact, in many places in West Virginia, in Mercer County, McDowell County, there is no water. You just, you take the pickup truck or the back of the car trunk, and you put a couple of barrels in there, go to a tap and fill it up a couple times a week.
Yep.
I hadn't realized that existed. And sewage in many places, especially in McDowell County, is running directly from these. I guess these houses were built by the railroad many years ago, and now they're rented to people who live there by the railroad, and they've been grandfathered into allowing a pipe to run into a freshwater stream. And so, if you want to see big trout, by the way, you don't want to eat them, but if you want to see big trout, you can see them there. But there are people who are actually, living this day in and day out without no access to fresh water and a tap, and then their sewage not being treated at all. So, I feel guilty in a way over the years of just thinking about the developing world, but we have some issues here, problems here as well. And some of those problems are addressed by organizations with the use of the port johns. One thing I think that would be really, really, really helpful. In my research lab, my students don't do too much by way of any kind of surveying, and certainly they're not into, as a group, they're not into marketing surveys. That sort of sample survey idea, especially you and I talked a little bit about the person not the person, but the organization that uses the long-term port john. Why do they do it? What advantages do they have? What disadvantages? So on and so forth. That might actually uncover, if you could get your arms around getting a sample. I don't know how we're going to do that.
It's not your job. That's ours.
To think about how you go about doing it. You certainly can't ask the port john company, because as I mentioned to you, they'll put a car bomb in my car.
Yeah.
But assuming you've got your arms around that, get those, it might do more than just look at a market. They might actually uncover some markets that we didn't know we had.
Yeah. Ultimately, anybody who uses a porta-john for permanent, semi-permanent use, could benefit from the use of something that's less expensive, less environmental impact, doesn't require a huge infrastructure. There's some, in order to be compliant, you need to have a superstructure and safety and things like that. But it's not like you need to have a giant pipe and access to some sort of disposal system or a septic tank or anything like that. We could, and we have, go on. I really find this fascinating. I think some of you would too. I think this is a great opportunity to have a project, whether we're talking about sizing the market, understanding the end user, developing that questionnaire, figuring out how you can talk to these people, any of these different aspects of how can I help. I think there's lots of ways we can help, particularly if you're interested in changing the world in a pretty positive way. Pretty exciting project to work on. Dr. Mecca, thank you. Oh, you might have a closing word for it.
Well, I was sitting here thinking, your audience here is, I don't know, 21 years old, 21, 22 years old. And here's this old professor and young professor pitching toilets as a project. And now what would the alternatives for you be? There might be, you might have the Pawtucket Red Sox, pitching marketing issues connected with a new stadium. Toilets, stadium, it's a real hard decision. So I think if you chose this project, I would know, and you could feel reassured that you are definitely engaged in the need issue here, what general problem we're trying to solve. So hopefully you consider it.
Yeah. Thanks again. I really do appreciate you taking this time with me. So that's it for this one. Check it out. Let me know. Fade to Black.